Hey guys, welcome. We are at Bija Yoga and Wellness Center in Orem, Utah. Really sick place. We have here with Rob.
Yes.
Wonderful Rob. Here we're doing yoga for this video. But yeah, thank you so much for having us, Rob. It's really fun.
Yeah.
I can say in advance that I'm the least flexible person you'll meet.
You've been doing great so far.
But you might hear a couple pops, back cracks and stuff like that. But we would love to just get to know you a little bit more, right?
Totally.
Present yourself and kind of what got you into yoga.
You bet. Yeah. Firstly, I'm stoked to be here. I love sharing about this. It's something that I'm passionate about. And when you teach a class, you don't get to delve into the history of how you got into it too much. So it's cool to be able to share that. I started yoga like 7 years ago, and I've been doing it off and on since. But I started off doing like yoga nidra. It's like the gateway drug to yoga. Like literally, it's just like a glorified shavasana of laying on your back, and it's just like a mellow meditation. And I did that mostly because I was just stressed as a high school student. Fast forward a few years, I stopped doing yoga, but then I got reintroduced because I had a shoulder injury and wanted something a little bit more easy on my body. And gradually, as I started practicing, I started kind of seeing the effects that people talk about. I was like, oh, okay, I feel more peaceful when I'm doing it, or I feel that, like, people talk about runner's high when you run. I feel like there's a yoga high of really getting into a state of dharana is a Sanskrit word, but a state of like focus, of deep concentration. And I started to feel that. So I gradually started to become more spiritual to me. And it wasn't just like a hobby. It wasn't just like something to work out doing, but it was like a meaningful practice that helped me feel like close to God even. And that's when it started taking on that deeper meaning. And in pursuit of that, I just bought a ticket to India. I went and studied in India for a few months, like 9 weeks. And I studied yoga there, studied meditation, and that was last year. And so now I have come back and tried to share some of the things I've learned.
That is so sick. I love that. Well, that's awesome.
Thank you.
That is the coolest thing I've ever heard. I feel like that makes you feel super below. I feel like it's kind of overwhelming to get into. You know, that's kind of the purpose of this video, of kind of expanding more on what normal people think yoga is, because I feel like a lot of people think it's just some poses and stuff like that. It's like the rich, whatever, white girl kind of thing, you know, where we have that kind of thing going on. But I think it's so much more, and that's what we're here to learn with this video. Cool. And so you kind of talked about yoga, and we'd love to learn a lot more about what you learned in India. I feel like that's a lot cooler than what you would learn here. I bet there's some good pros and cons, but I guess what we kind of dive into is the mindfulness of yoga. You know, so how would you describe, you know, in your words, the interrelation between yoga and being mindful? Yeah, great question.
And I'll kind of spew off some things, and you can like correct me if you'd like me to focus on something else, because it's a pretty big topic, right? I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned real quick, that like India, it's like cooler. I think maybe at the surface level, it does seem like, holy crap, if I went to India, I could really figure my stuff out, right? But I do want to clarify this, though I did go to India and it was cool. You can find mindfulness and good yoga like so many places. So for any of the homies watching, don't think that you have to go to India to learn these things. I can suggest a lot of great studios like this one. But in terms of the connection between yoga and mindfulness, so yoga, the root word dates back to, so the origin, I think it's yod, but it essentially just means union. And it's union of mind, of spirit and body and breath, really. And I think when you have a HIIT class, you're kind of just going there to check out. You just want to work out so hard. If you do CrossFit, you're just like trying to go so hard, you check out of your body. Yoga is the opposite. You check into your body, you check into your breath, and you check into your spirit as you are moving. And I think that's the biggest distinction between so many of these other physical practices and what yoga can be. Certainly you can go to a power yoga class and you just check out and you sweat a lot and great. If you want a broader, all-encompassing definition of yoga, there's technically 8 limbs to it.
Yeah.
And in the Western world, we're all like, asana, that's the one limb of movement, right? And that's the rich white girl classic epitome of American yoga, right? But that's just one limb, the movement. So all of the limbs are yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Okay, those are the Sanskrit names, and they encompass like a moral code, and then there's that movement, and then there's breath work, and then there's like sensory deprivation, and then there's focus and meditation and enlightenment. Okay. And I think that element that overlaps, all of it connects to mindfulness, but the biggest limb that connects to mindfulness is probably dharana and dhyana, so focus and meditation. First of all, if I just keep spewing out things, I want to give you the chance to ask any questions, or if you would like me to speak to anything in particular. Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
I think that's really cool. I loved how it's giving us some overview, like the languages. I know it comes from kind of a Hindu background. Is that where it stems from?
Yeah, so like technically Sanskrit, that's like the oldest language of India. And then Hindi and like every other language that they speak in the different states of India all have a base in Sanskrit. And so though Sanskrit isn't really spoken anymore, that's like the foundational language for so many of those other regional languages. And yoga is primarily, like, it's been flushed out in Sanskrit. So all the scripts and stuff that we have to refer back to it, like the scripts of Patanjali and those like ancient yogic scrolls and such, that's Sanskrit. But but those 2 limbs that we don't really talk about very often, it's like this really deep concentration is dharana, and then dhyana is more of like a state of mindfulness, so not so concentrated, but it's a state of awareness. This non-judgmental, non-reactive state of awareness is kind of a definition of mindfulness and also dhyana. And so you kind of watch your thoughts go by as clouds, and that is an element of yoga, right? And then there's other elements where you are super zoomed in and focused on a drishti, is a gazing point. So you're doing a posture and you're like, I gotta stare at the base of my palms. And so you're staring and you're like sweating and you're just trying to concentrate as much as you can. And that conditions the brain and conditions that muscle of mindfulness.
Wow. That's so cool, because I feel like that kind of contradicts, like, it's not just poses, but you're doing so much internal work while you're doing so much physical work.
Yeah.
And with my basic knowledge, I've seen it's not more of a physical thing, but it's like a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what yoga has to do with what it is now?
Yeah, and certainly for me, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be, and I tell my students this as well, like for me it's become tremendously spiritual, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. If you just want it to be an opportunity to connect your mind and body, and you don't want to deal with the like spirituality of it, I think you're missing out, but it doesn't have to be. But certainly I think that there's more power in yoga when you allow that other element of spirituality to be a part.
So how would you say for someone like me, who's bare minimum, I guess we can, to spice the interview up, we can do some yoga poses.
Let's do it.
While we do it.
Yeah.
But, as someone like me, how would you, I guess there's like some big, it's kind of hard to get into, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people have that idea where it's like, oh my gosh, it's a spiritual thing, it's maybe not my thing, it's overwhelming to get into.
Totally.
So I guess in your experience, what kind of led you to get into it, and what advice would you give to someone else who's trying to get into yoga?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I alluded to it earlier. I said, like, I think the gateway drug to yoga is like yoga nidra, or like if people lay down and do shavasana, right? It just feels really good to lay down on your back and to just slow down for a sec. Like, when was the last time you laid down on your back without the intention of going to sleep and without your phone, you know? Like, I think just laying here and taking a second to breathe, we're almost always bombarded with some type of stimulus. And so I think if people want to get into yoga, taking a second and just laying down is a great way to like start conditioning your mind to a more yogic lifestyle, if you will. We can try a little pigeon posture if you want to try that. So you'll take, and you can mirror me, so you can use your right leg.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so you'll essentially bring your knees so it's framed between your hands. Yeah.
Okay.
So you bring that knee so it's nice and high up there, and then you can untuck the foot as much space as you have. For me, I'm pretty tight. Some people can bring their leg all the way out to 90 degrees and then they'll sit up, but you just want to have your hips so they're relatively square. Yeah.
Okay, does that look good, or do you want it more out?
That's great. Okay. And then you kind of just like come down, and we can big chillin', just chat right here.
Wow. This is crazy.
And just like try and breathe into that. Normally we mellow things out at the end of class or a lot of teachers like to slow things down with something like pigeon. And if you hang out, if you're watching TV and you just hang out here, these are also good ways to warm up your body and your mind to the idea of doing yoga without having to like go to like an Ashtanga primary class.
Got it.
Also, I say that Ashtanga is not the epitome of good yoga. It's just a style. It's one of my favorite styles. But yogis can get pretty elitist in their they think their practice is the best.
Yeah.
In Utah Valley, vinyasa is like really cool. And I think vinyasa is great. I think we can switch sides. But I think there's elements of Ashtanga that I really like, which is just another style. But there's no hierarchy of yoga. Whether you're doing just something easy or you're doing some cool arm balance, it's all yoga. Just breathing can be yoga, right? We talked about the 8 limbs. But
I guess like if let's say I don't want to go to a studio, let's say like, oh, it's so far, or for people who it's hard to commute, you know, or it's something like, well, maybe they have that social anxiety. What do you recommend? Or like, I guess you can start in your living room, but I guess it's less physical. How do you hone in more to like, let's say I'm at the grocery store and there's an angry customer or something like that. How do you implement that kind of oneness?
Let's go ahead and bring this leg. The left leg is going to come all the way over, and we'll have this. Yeah. Oh, so you're right. Sorry. Okay. All right, because we're married. So then you'll just bring that up and over. Just a little twist there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you can hook your left arm over and, a little twist. That's a really good question. If I can speak to the limbs of yoga again, if you wouldn't mind. Yama Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara is a limb that I think is so underrated. Deep inhale here, and exhale, twist a little more. Pratyahara is this, or Pratyahara is how they say it in India. Then go ahead and unravel, and we can just find it on the other side. So then you'll draw, good. It's like a sensory deprivation. And in a modern context, what does that look like? A digital detox would be a great pratyahara, right? So you could say it's like, if you've heard of like vows of silence, if you've heard of those types of, I did a Vipassana meditation where I was silent for like 10 days. I broke it, but.
Oh, wow.
Or like you'll see like darkness retreats where you'll go into darkness, and that's a sensory deprivation. You don't have to go sit in darkness or silence for 10 days to achieve that, and then we'll unwind. Then bring the soles of your feet together and then scoot them in, just a little butterfly. Sit up nice and tall.
Brings me back to like kindergarten.
Yeah, right. And in kindergarten, I feel like we would always like flap. I was actually told not to flap in yoga.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that like can put
Some strains.
Strain, yeah. So you want to be a little bit more methodical and slower about it. Cool. Then lean forward if you can a little bit. Maybe open up the soles of your feet. Sometimes that feels nice. But I think if you're trying to tap into this like spiritual or additional component of yoga that's not going to a studio, or that's not the physical practice, try like a sensory deprivation. So, and that could mean like less dopamine. So that means maybe you don't eat a really rich food for the day, like you just have more bland food. Or maybe you don't spend any time on a screen. Or maybe no music, like a music fast. Any variation of a fast would be considered pratyahara. And I think that's a pretty underrated component of yoga that people don't really consider. And we'll bring both feet out in front of us. This is called Paschimottanasana. I
love that idea of it can be like a mental practice and a fast. I guess that's so interesting. I feel like these days it's super hard. You know?
Yeah, totally.
How, I guess in terms of, I've only fasted with food, you know, and when I'm fasting and I have those hunger moments, I'm like, okay, well, when my beliefs, when I'm fasting for a specific purpose. But I guess in terms of yoga, when you want those like, those sudden urges, what do you come back to, you know? What's that kind of...
The motivation? Yeah, that's a good question. So, have you heard of karma?
Yeah.
Okay. People always say like karma's a bitch, right? Which is really a miss. I mean, obviously our Western interpretation of karma isn't amazing. So let's go ahead and bring the knees closer together. Hopefully it won't cover the mic. And then sit up really tall. And then see if you can just float your feet off the ground. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to fall.
You can just hold in this little egg shape. Nice. Good job. This is actually, it's harder than it looks.
It really is. I feel like my butt is so flat. So it's like on its edge and it can only be in one position.
There you go. You're doing great. Okay, bring the hands to the backs of the legs. Okay. And then we'll just open the legs a little bit and let the core work as we're chilling here. Okay. So you brought up like, what is your purpose? So karma is this idea of doing a service or doing something without attachment. Yeah. So there's no attachment to good, there's no attachment to bad. You're doing awesome. I'm like dying over here. This is killing me. I don't know how you're doing it. You make it look so easy. Couple more breaths, fully extend and hold. So there's no attachment at all, and exhale, release. Good. And so I think a lot of faith practices have this idea of like, I'm going to do this so I can get closer to Jesus. Yeah. I'm going to do this. So we're so focused on do. What will I do? So why am I doing this fast? One of my mentors, he's like, we're not human doings. We're human beings, right? That's awesome. And I think this principle of not being so caught up in like, what's the outcome? What am I attached to? Why am I doing this? Maybe let it float for a bit and be like, I'm just gonna see what happens if I don't have an attachment, if I'm just quiet for a day. Yeah. I went down to Moab. This was way before I really got into this journey, but I wanted to try silence. So I went down to Moab. I pitched a tent, and for 24 hours, I was just silent there, and I didn't say a word. Actually, there were a couple times where I like let words slip, and you notice how much you talk to yourself. And then when I drove home, once I hit 24 hours, I spoke, and I was like, whoa. And then I turned on music, and it was like so much richer, and it was so much deeper. I didn't necessarily have an objective. I just wanted to try and experience. And I think more people should approach life in a way where they're like, well, what do I get from it? It's like, well, I don't know, maybe just try it and release attachment, release the objective, and maybe you'll experience something profound. And maybe you won't. Yeah. But not being attached to the outcome of like, I need to experience something profound. So that's kind of a non-answer for you, but that's what I have.
I mean, that's perfect. I feel like that's There's so much need for, I guess in these days, there's so much consumerism, we're always having so much clutter, mindlessly scrolling. And I know like recently things have been kind of stressful with like school and work and personal life. So I feel like we try to fill it more with like these dopamine things that you were mentioning with like, let's go to the movies or let's go watch, reels or stuff like that. And so I think that's really cool. Are we facing our backs?
We're gonna face back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we'll actually face this way with our faces. We're making our way to Purvottanasana. Don't lose your thought though. Sorry, continue. I was just.
Oh no, you're good.
Yeah.
Wait, tell me.
So you're gonna sit up really strong.
Okay.
And then bring hands right beside the hips, and then we'll lower down to elbows. Okay. And then that's kind of your measurement. You're gonna replace your elbows with your hands, so you scoot them back. Good. And then the tendency is to have elbows flare out, but you want to have them tucked in so you're open through the chest. Really nice. And then point the toes. And then bring the hips to the sky and let the head hang. So you can just check out the camera from here. You're just chilling.
I guess you're at a better angle.
This is called Purvottanasana, or reverse plank. How does it feel?
This is awesome.
Really point those toes. See if you can get them to touch the ground and bring the hips a little higher to the sky. Ooh, yes.
Okay.
Over here for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Exhale. Release. Good job.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I guess you mentioned something different. What I was interested in was like the language, are those literal translations for a plank, or is it something?
That's a good question. I actually don't know what I just know that the English interpretation or the English posture that we have is reverse plank. For example, let's go to tabletop. One of the postures is called what is it called in Sanskrit? I just forgot it. So take this left foot and then tuck it over the right. Yeah, nice, good. Okay. And then see if you can nestle back into it. Oh.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, I literally just had this posture in my mind of what it's called, but in English it's called cow face.
Cow face.
Cow face, and I don't know why. I don't think it looks like a cow. And in Sanskrit, I'm not convinced that the direct translation is cow face. Maybe it is. I can't remember what the word is. I say it like all the time. But anyways, I don't know. I think some of the postures, like Paschimottanasana, doesn't necessarily mean, it does mean forward fold. So generally we try and have close translations, but it's not always perfect. Are you feeling fiery?
I feel good? It, for sure.
Good. Okay, let's get the other side. Like tabletop, I don't even think tabletop has a name in Sanskrit. Like some of these things we've just
made up.
We just made them up, yeah.
I guess, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Nice, solid. But so some people think it's a little pretentious to use the Sanskrit names. They're like, oh gosh, this teacher is like obnoxious and thinks he's the cat's pajamas. And I really don't intend for it to be that way. When I teach, I realize that it can come across as like pretentious or elitist.
Yeah.
But for me, knowing the Sanskrit names has kind of deepened the practice, and it's, for lack of a better term, it's consecrated it. It's made it special, right? And I think we can unwrap. I think having that distinction. I start off all of my classes with an opening mantra, which makes some people uncomfortable. Yeah. But for me, it's like it's a really cool way to set apart the practice. It's like a chant. Yeah. And it's not to be pretentious, but it's just to let people realize, hey, now is a different time than all of the other hours of your day. It's a different time, it's a different experience than all of the other physical activities that you've done. When was the last time you started a HIIT class with a mantra? I don't know, probably didn't, but...
Never have.
Yeah. Once again, a long, verbose answer for you, so I love this.
No, this is so fun, because that's the purpose of this, and I guess We're saying at the beginning of your yoga practices, you do a mantra with it.
Yeah.
What kind of words are spoken in that? And I guess I like what you said because going back a little bit, like I would say, like if I were to insult someone, I'd be like, oh, you look like a cow face, or like, oh, something like that. So I get the need to kind of separate it and use the specific names because when else are you going to say those names? You know, you're only using it for that.
Right. Yeah.
Is that kind of what it's for?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of like a recognition. It's a respect to the practice. You know, like I don't know, like any tradition. I think traditions can be negative and they can be positive, but it's like your family's Mexican, right? So ay canta y no llores is like a song, right? You just sing it in that language because that's the origin of the song.
Of course.
I wouldn't like try and interpret that ay sing and don't cry, or because that's the origin. And I think with yoga we kind of like we're like, oh, it doesn't matter, we'll call it triangle pose.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you can, that's totally fine, but if you know that it's trikonasana, then say it like,
of course.
say it like that. And to me it adds it separates it, it makes it special. But it's certainly not a must do. And the mantra it's a recognition of all yoga practitioners that have come before us, and it does add a spiritual element to it. It's just like a series of lines and recognitions of yogis and such. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
Wow, I think that's really cool because I guess I kind of want to dive into that, like the social, like what even society thinks of yoga, and kind of like what I'm trying to get at is what would you want like society to know? Like I guess there's these stigmas of yoga. I guess what are the things that people may think, and if you can kind of, you know, talk about it a little bit so we understand, so it's not just like, oh, they're just being pretentious as you did like that. Are there any other things in terms of yoga?
That's a really good question. Let's thread the needle. So you can open the left hand to the sky and then send it all the way under. And you'll just have like a nice side stretch and shoulder stretch. You can reach the right hand up and kind of relax into so that left shoulder will touch the ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's a super good question. So what are some of the misconceptions that society has about yoga? One that I think I think the biggest misconception is that advanced yoga means like these acrobatic or gymnastic level poses. And we'll inhale, come up. People look at a handstand and they're like, holy cow, he must be such a yogi. It's like, or maybe he was a gymnast for 15 years and he's only been doing yoga for like a year, you know? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at yoga. Then you open and then send it through. So that's the first misconception, is that advanced does not mean like acrobatic or contortionistic. So yeah. Another one that we'll go ahead and rise up and then we'll come to kneeling. Another misconception about yoga. This maybe isn't a super misconception because I don't really think that it's conceived at all. I think most people don't know about this aspect of yoga. I will say one thing that I learned when I went to India. Let's go ahead and scoot up closer and then open up the legs a little bit and then lay back if you can make it to your forearms. Awesome, we're chilling here.
That's not happening.
You find your sweet spot, dude. But once you're there, then you'll just kind of nestle in. So maybe that's on your hands. Yeah, cool. And try and breathe into that. One thing when I went to India that I discredited a lot of their practices because it didn't seem like it had scientific basis, right? I'm like, you guys, like they have a lot of cleansing kriyas that they practice that are pretty weird. They'll swallow a gauze and then pull it back out through their mouth after it's soaked up the bile in your stomach. Or they'll say, some things I disagree with. I mean, they'll say, yeah, like women can't do inversions, like go upside down when they're menstruating. I'm like,
Oh, wow.
there's no scientific basis in that. Yeah. But they have a lot of tradition. And I think it's important to honor some of that tradition, even though it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Some things, take what serves you, but I think give a little bit more leeway. I think people are really quick to critique old tradition, especially we're just woke and we're like, we know what's best. It's like, no, there's some wisdom in ancient tradition.
Yeah.
So use your better judgment, but I think a misconception, especially for people when they go to India, is to say that it's dated. I hear a lot of people that are really critique Ashtanga because of alignment, you know. Granted, Ashtanga is an ancient show. We can untuck.
You're silently dying over there.
But I'm so sorry, I didn't even think about that. But I would just say not being so quick to judge, and being a little bit more open-minded about things that are different, which is maybe not a misconception, but just a general good life principle.
Got it. So, I love that. Okay, kind of like I love what we have been able to talk about. I feel like I remember like studying a little bit of yoga prior to this. But it's so cool to think about. It's more of a, it's more of a state of being, is what I got from this. It's more of like there's a lot more tradition involved than more people think. Yeah. And it can be simply practiced, at home, wherever you are, as you said, like just having a type of fast or a type of intention, or even doing things without intention. Yeah. I love that it's so open at the end of the day. It's just it's so broad. But we really appreciate the time you gave us. Here, we work with Tapaboga, which is short for the apothecary at the Bonsai Gardens. And kind of our mission is kind of to create this community of well-being, being in a state of mindfulness, and kind of just helping people along that path. Like as myself, I find it super hard to get into yoga, but I don't think I ever would have done it if it weren't for this interview. But I learned a lot, and I love that people can get into this and kind of, with simple videos like this, they feel more, accepted into this kind of community, in this state of thinking. And so kind of, if you could kind of get any last words, what kind of is, out of all of that we've talked about, what would your main point be?
I think I hear people say yoga's not for me, and I totally want to respect everybody's wishes, right? But at the same time, I genuinely do believe that yoga, to some extent, can be and really should be a part of everybody's life. Especially when you understand at a more holistic level, like what it means. Having a moral code, connecting to your breath, being mindful, doing movement, doing fasts from certain stimuli, and meditating, and then having a goal towards some higher state, right? All of those are the different limbs. Everybody should allow that to kind of structure their lives, and some faiths or some beliefs or philosophies do that. But I would say for people, like my concluding note would be to just give it a try. Whether that's in a studio, whether that's doing just a meditation, whether that's yoga with Adrienne on YouTube, whatever, she does yoga with her dog and people love her. She's great. So I say, whatever that is, the benefits are tremendous. There's tons of psychological research that demonstrates that like a meditation practice of 10 minutes a day can have a drastic effect on your overall well-being and the state of your mental health. Like, it's worth it. And people, they'll come to yoga and they'll be like, oh, I feel so much better. Like, I should do this more. I'm like,
you should.
You should. And so I just guess an invitation to dip your toes in and try it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I know I will definitely I will be sore tomorrow, which is it's just a good sign.
We didn't go easy. We did a lot of things. So
I literally feel my back like.
Also, just from sitting like this is like taxing. So.
But I really appreciate that. I hope people who are watching, can really see that it's, it's a simple visit, and what could be one visit could be, a life that changes, and not. I think it's dramatic to say and cliche, but I feel like it really is. Like it's like you could change the way you view life.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think that's awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. Yeah. Good luck to all of you guys, and I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think creating more spaces like this in Utah, it can't be oversaturated. I think the more accessible yoga and meditation is, the better. So I think what you're doing is awesome. So.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
And is there like a good way? How do you end your meetings or your classes?
So I end with a mantra, and then here in the Western world, you say namaste. But in India, namaste is actually a greeting. It's like, hey, it's like, what's up? Yeah. It's a beautiful way of saying it. It's like the divine in me sees the divine in you. But normally we just say Om Shanti.
Which is?
It's like, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's just like a peace be with you. You can fact check me on that, but we would end our classes saying Om Shanti, 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 and then boom, it's over. So Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Yeah, great.
I'm at Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Beautiful. You said it wonderfully.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
That was awesome.
Good job, dude. Thank you so much. It was great, great recording with you guys, and great questions, and also waited.